Hey there, and welcome to Career Chats Live, Longwood's LinkedIn Influencers Week, brought to you by Longwood University. So Longwood is a co-educational public institution offering more than 100 majors, minors, and concentrations. If you haven't heard of us before, I'm sure you will in the fall, because we are hosting the only U.S. vice presidential debate October 4th. So you can check us out at longwood.edu. So my name is Paige Rollins, the Assistant Director of Live Digital Events at Longwood University, and I'm so excited to kick off this week with Jeff Haden, ghostwriter for Inc. magazine and contributing editor, as he shares his top five ways to help you get ahead of the game. So just some housekeeping. Jeff will give his presentation, and there'll be plenty of time at the end for live Q&A. So if you peek at the bottom of your screen, you can see the Q&A box where you can submit questions live, as well as the chat to join in the conversation with everybody else, as well as build your network and get to know some other people. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jeff, and we can go ahead and get started.
Thank you. I will try not to mess up sharing my screen.
You're doing great.
So,
perfect.
So are we good?
Yep.
Okay, the title of my presentation was supposed to be 5 ways to get promoted at work, but I went long-winded and I ended up with a lot more ways. And there are a lot more past what I'm going to discuss. So you will have to bear with me, but I think they are all really good. A couple things before we get started. As a person who wants to get promoted, what you will not do and what I will not talk about is anything that's unethical or unprofessional. I'm not going to talk about playing political games in order to get ahead. I'm not going to talk about pursuing some sort of agenda that is very different from your organization's. After all, you do work for them, so their goals should be your goals. I definitely am not going to talk about trying to win by making other people lose. That is what a lot of people do. They want to get promoted by, well, in order to get promoted, you are being selected from a group of people who were up for that job. One way is to be the best, and one way is to try to make other people look bad, and we are not going to talk about that. But we're also not going to try to hack our way to success. There is no magic bullet. There is no 3 quick tips that will ensure you get promoted. It requires work, and it requires effort, and it requires some planning. But the good news is if you do everything right, you can. So here's what you will do. You're going to help other people succeed. The best quote that I ever heard about leadership was someone said, I think it's John Wooden, the UCLA coach, said, every great leader makes the decision that his or her success and happiness will come from the success and happiness of other people. So that will be your focus. You're going to help your organization succeed. You are going to get promoted because you have accomplished things and you deserve it. Along the way, you'll build a lasting network of meaningful connections. That's a good thing in and of itself. One of the most important things to me is that you get to go home every day proud of yourself and what you've done. That's why this isn't a hack your way to success thing. This isn't a shortcut. This isn't a sneaky little tricks kind of a presentation. Going home every day feeling good about yourself is a reward in and of itself, no matter how long it takes you to get promoted. And lastly, some of the things that I talk about will sound like maybe you're subsuming your personality and your individuality to that of the company, but you don't have to do that. You can still be yourself and yet still adapt to your organization's goals and cultures. You can pull all that off. It's not an easy balance to strike, but it is one that you can strike. And you will find as you get more successful and you are better thought of in your organization that you get to be a little bit more of yourself. That's kind of a cool outcome. So we're going to start with the why you want to get promoted. I know you want more money. I know you want more responsibility. I know you want to move ahead. But the best way to approach it is because you want the responsibility of the job and not the authority. And there's a really big difference. If you have the authority, that means you get to make decisions. Fine, but that's not really an outcome. Wanting to be responsible because you're accountable and because you want to make things better, that's the reason that you should want to get promoted. You also want to be promoted because you want to help people and not direct them. Yes, you get to be the boss. Yes, you get to tell people what to do. But your goal should be to guide them in a way that helps them succeed and helps your company succeed. It's not just because you get to be in charge. And the last one is my favorite, and I made a mistake one time when I decided on a promotion. I picked a person that wanted the job, that wanted the title and not the job. And there's a really big difference. If you want the title, that means you want the office, that means you want the business card, that means you want the perks. You want the trappings of the job. If you want to be promoted, you should want the job itself. You should want the duties that come along with it. You should want the responsibilities that come with it. You should want to do the work. And if that's why you want to be promoted, you'll get that job because you will do the things necessary to show that you're the one that should do the work. If all you want is the title, sometimes you can get the job, but you're not going to be happy, and you're definitely not going to succeed, and you're not going to get promoted the next time because you're going to be too busy worried about your office. So in my way of thinking, if you look at your job now and the job you want that way, then you're successful every day, even if it takes you months or years to get promoted, because you get to feel good about yourself. So let's talk about some basics, and then we'll get into some specifics. In order to get promoted, you have to work harder now, not after you're promoted. I, at one time, had 350 people that worked for me, and invariably, we would talk about their effort, and we would talk about what they were doing, and they would say, you know, if I got promoted, I would work harder. Well, that's the opposite approach you should take. If you want the next job, work harder now and earn the next job. Don't wait to get more until you are given more. Do what you need to do now, and you will get there. You also have to work smarter now, not after you get greater freedom and latitude. Usually when you move up in an organization, you are given more freedom to make decisions and to choose how you do your job. You can do that at any level, though, as long as you are performing well. That just means you have to be smart, you have to be strategic. So think about doing things differently now, not when you are allowed to. And I know there's a balance you have to strike there because you have expectations that you have to meet, but nonetheless, there are a lot of things you can do in your job that you don't think you can, but you can. Here's the trickiest part. You have to be willing to set yourself apart from other people. And I don't mean to be isolated, but if you want to be seen as the best person in your job or the best person to be promoted, you have to stand out. You have to be different. You can't be one of the crowd, or else you are one of the crowd. That means that sometimes people are going to say to you, oh, you only volunteered for that because you want to get promoted. Well, yes. Or, oh, you're only staying late tomorrow because you want to get promoted. Well, yes. Or whatever it is that you're doing that's different than other people, some people are going to criticize you for doing so. You have to be willing to take that, and that just comes with the territory of excelling at things. I think in Australia they call it the tall poppy syndrome, where the tallest flower in the field gets blown over by the wind. People will criticize you for working harder than they do. And that's okay, because you have your own path that you want to follow. You have your own goals. You should do what you want to do to get you there, and don't really worry about that. And speaking of goals, the biggest thing you have to do is stay focused on what you are trying to do. It's really easy to drift and think, well, when I first come in, I'll hang out and talk to people about what, the game last night or what they've been doing. I love to take my hour-and-a-half lunch because it's me time. There's all those kinds of things that you can do. Depends on what you want to do. If you want to get promoted, then you will set aside some of that stuff and you'll focus on doing everything you can to be the best candidate. So let's go into some specifics. This one will sound general, but it's not. The very first thing you should do is figure out what your organization's competitive advantage is. Every organization has some value proposition that drives it forward, or some function that is more important than most in the company. And you already know what it is. For some people it's sales, for some people it's quality, some people it's how they interact with customers. You know what it is, and a lot of the other functions support that. Your job, if you want to get promoted, is to figure out what your organization values most and then find ways to get involved in some of those functions. Doesn't mean you have to have that job, but you can help out. You can be part of teams that or committees. You can find ways, and that's where your creativity has to come in. But when you do that, the people that matter will notice you. The people that matter will start to connect with you. and you will be seen as a person who, for want of a better way to put it, gets it. That does mean you have to work a little extra, especially if you're going to volunteer for things, which we'll talk about in a bit. But you're going to learn a lot of stuff. You'll add some tools to your skill set, which is always a good thing. You'll make your organization a better place, which is also a good thing. And from a promotability point of view, you will have met some people and impressed some people who truly matter in your organization. And that is a key thing. You cannot just be in your little silo if you want to be noticed by the right people. So that's number one. Figure out what your organization values most and find ways to get involved in that, even if your job doesn't specifically include that. Number two is a little more specific, especially because of the title. Be known for a specific skill. Say there are 10 people that do your job. You might be the best one, but best to other people is often subjective. Try to be the best at your job, but then try to pick out one thing that makes you that guy or that gal. You can be the leader, as I say here, you can be the leader that's known for turning around struggling employees. I worked with a guy that was seemingly all he did, and he was awesome at taking people who were underperforming and getting them to a much better place. We all knew him for that. You can be the supervisor. Again, these are things that are sort of outside of your job, but you can be a supervisor that personally makes a few deliveries every week to check in with customers. You're that customer guy. Or you can be the manager who develops more people than anyone else. You're the developmental gal. You can be known as the employee who responds quicker, acts faster, always follows up. You can pick something that you're going to have a go-to skill that people know that that's where you really excel, and they think of you when the problem arises that relates to that. So pick something you like that also adds value to your company and become that go-to person. A good example, my wife worked for R.R. Donnelly, where I worked at the same time, and she was in pricing, and she was like the spreadsheet queen. And so whenever they struggled with some complicated spreadsheet, they went to her. That doesn't mean that she's the most qualified person for the next promotion, but it did mean she was memorable. It did mean she was noticed. It did get her involved with some other people in the organization. So always try that. I did something similar. This is a long time ago, but I tried to put all our HR policies on an intranet so that they were searchable through a browser instead of the paper. I did it. It took me a long time because I had to learn to do web programming. Figured it out, took it to the HR folks. She hated it. It didn't actually get used, but I became the tech guy for whatever reason in my department, even though I had very limited technical skills. That got me assigned to a company-wide project where we were trying to improve operations across the company, and that actually is what got me my next promotion. So be that person, and you'll be surprised by what that will mean. This one, everybody knows about managing up, and it's the idea of how do I manage my boss? That kind of implies that you shape the information you provide. You maybe don't say everything that you know. You parse things a certain way. I prefer not to manage up. If you want to impress your boss, and for want of a better way to put it, get in good with your boss, help your boss achieve his or her targets. If your department has a certain function that it provides, that may not be all of the goals that your boss is tasked with accomplishing. So, and everyone has a boss. So figure out what your boss's key goals are, whatever their key metrics are, and the easiest way to do that is to ask. And then ask how you can help, or better yet, come back later and offer specific ways that you can help. If you help your boss succeed, then you are a key player, and it also shows again that you get it. So don't think about managing the information you provide to your boss. Think about helping your boss get to wherever he or she wants to go, and you will probably ride along with. A friend of mine that runs a staffing company, one of the questions he asks during interviews is, how many times did you bring other people with you to a new job? And then he also asks people, how many times were you brought to a new job by the person who had moved to that company? That idea that you build a network of people that you work with and that you create a great team with, that's huge. So help your boss reach his or her goals. It's not sucking up. It's helping drive results for your organization. And again, I don't like the managing up thing because I do think it comes across as sneaky and manipulative. You don't want to be known for that in any way, shape, or form. You'd rather be known as the person who helps other people succeed. My next one is be first with a purpose. A lot of people figure that if they're the first one to work in the morning or they're the last one to leave, that shows dedication and hard work. And it does. But what you do with that time matters a lot more. So if you're the first one in, sitting at your desk and playing with your email and taking care of your social media accounts is probably not beneficial to anyone. So be the person that comes in first and does something that helps everyone else. You can take care of unresolved problems from the day before. You can make it easier for other people to hit the ground running. You can work on an ongoing project that's been neglected. Your goal is to be, Jeff's always here early, and he's always doing this, and that is really great for the rest of us. Or Jeff's always here a little bit later than everyone, and that's great because if we have a last-minute emergency, we can go to him. The key is to, if you're going to do extra time, make it purposeful. Don't just make it, hey, I'm putting in the time. I don't care as a boss about how many hours you work. I care about your output. Some bosses do care about how many hours you work, and if that's the case, take advantage of that and make it I work a lot of hours and I get a lot done and I get the right things done. That is really the key. Create your own side project. I know you're busy. I know you have a lot of things to do. I know you probably feel overwhelmed, but so does everyone else you work with. Another way to really stand out, which is what we're trying to do here, is to create your own side project. You might want to, a lot of people wait to be assigned. That's fine, but when you're assigned a project, you're expected to excel. And if you don't, that's obviously a bad thing. When you create your own project and you excel at your own project, now you've really stood out because not only did you do something no one expected, but you did it really, really well. And no one forgets that. My best example of this, a friend of mine, Jim Whitehurst, he runs the Linux company Red Hat. He worked at Delta and he was the treasurer of Delta Airlines. And he looked at their on-time performance for flights, which all of us care about. And Delta's was terrible at the time. I have no idea how it is now. But it was terrible at the time, and so he got the IT folks to give him all kinds of data about routing and scheduling and on-time performance, and he took all that home, and every night he would play with the data to try to figure out patterns and why things were happening and why connections would get missed and why there were delays, talk to people in the company. He did all of that stuff, and he did it on his own time, not during the core time that he was supposed to be spending as a treasurer. And he actually figured out a lot of ways that they could improve the process. And at one point, the CEO of the company came to him and said, "You're always bugging us about operations. We're just going to put you in charge of that." So he went from treasurer to chief operating officer, which is a really unusual jump, because he got involved in something and he decided that he was going to make a difference. You don't have to do something quite that drastic, obviously, but you can look around and just say, what's the pain point for our company? What's the pain point for our organization? What are we not doing particularly well? What could we do a lot better? What could we do that our customers would really benefit from? And then go off and give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, you don't have to tell anyone. You can just kind of hide that away. You'll still learn something from doing it. And if it does work out, now you're the person that took initiative, made things happen, saw a project through, and you did it on your own time. I know what I just said when I said own time. You're thinking, wow, I have enough work to do and I have enough outside stuff to do. I really don't need more. And that's okay, but if you're trying to stand out and you want to be the person that gets promoted, you have to be different. And this is one way that you can be different. I had never seen hard work not get rewarded, ever. Next one is focus on offering solutions. Lots of us go to meetings and we can point out problems and we can complain and we can talk about issues and we can raise all sorts of concerns. Everybody does that. That doesn't make you stand out. That just makes you part of the crowd. What most people don't do is offer solutions to whatever those problems are. So, and then again, what most people don't do past that is actually be part of making something change. So if you think a project's gone off the rails, instead of just talking about how it's not performing so you can seem smart and insightful, talk about what to do to make it different, and then be a person that jumps in to help fix that. If you want to stand out, and again, I'm going to say it over and over again, but standing out is what this is all about. Talking about problems, everyone does all day long. People who fix them are the people that stand out. The people that fix them are the people that are given more responsibility, that are given more authority, that are given more opportunities, because you've earned it. So offer solutions wherever you can, and then be part of making that happen. Of course, what that means is sometimes you have to volunteer. And again, we're back to doing more. And I put in parentheses wisely because, well, you'll see in a second. Whenever you raise your hand, you automatically have to do more. You can see that as a negative, or you can flip it around and see that as a positive. If you are doing more, you get to learn, you get to gain skills, you get to build new relationships, you get to interact with other people, you get to impress people, you get to do something more than you would otherwise been able to do. So the key is to volunteer for things. If we go all the way back to number one about how your organization creates value, try to volunteer for things that fall into that category. If you need to rearrange the warehouse on a Saturday, you can volunteer for that. That might be okay. If you need to help redo the CRM function for your Salesforce, that might be a better deal. So figure out what your company does that adds value. Volunteer for the projects that get you in front of the people that are involved in those processes and that will teach you something about that, and that works out well. And this seems a little sneaky, but it's not. But the more you volunteer for meaningful projects, the easier it is to not volunteer when there's a task that comes up that isn't going to add any value or advance your career. So if you volunteered for 3 pretty cool things and the reorganize the warehouse thing comes up, well, you can keep your hand down and feel good about it, and no one will probably assign you to that because they know that you volunteered for other stuff. And my last part of this slide is really important. Success is always based on action. I was talking earlier to someone here at Longwood, and I said ideas should be a verb, because if you have an idea but you don't act on it, it really wasn't an idea, it's just a dream. Success is the same way. It's always based on action. It's not what you think, it's what you do. So the more you volunteer, the more you get to do. And then you get chances to show people you're a can-do employee, and that always gets you noticed because everyone wants the can-do employee. Meetings. You hate meetings. I hate meetings. Most people hate meetings. That can be an advantage for you because most people come to a meeting and they're checking their email, they're working on other stuff, they're pretending to be busy. It's almost like college where everybody in the lecture hall is doing other stuff on their laptops while the professor's up front. You can flip that around though and use that as an advantage to stand out. Sorry. You can be the most prepared person there. How many meetings have you gone to where half the room doesn't even really know what the meeting's about, wants to spend the first 10 minutes finding out what it's about, and then has to sit there and instantly try to offer solutions and make decisions? Happens all the time. Should not happen to you. You should be ready to roll. You can also pay better attention than anyone else. Usually the person leading the meeting is a person with some responsibility and authority and probably higher up the corporate food chain. And if you are paying attention, they notice because they want people to pay attention. I don't care how big your ego is. When people aren't paying attention to you when you're talking, it's hard. So be the most attentive person. You'll be amazed what you will pick up on if you are paying attention. You can also be the person who speaks just when you can add genuine value. All of us know people that go to meetings and they will say something before the meeting is over just so that they can have participated, but it's usually something that doesn't help a soul. Don't be that person. Be the one that actually has value and that takes a discussion forward or helps make decisions or helps create an action plan. Be that person. That's when a meeting is worthwhile. A meeting that doesn't result in a decision or an action plan or some kind of outcome is just a discussion, and that's the kind of meeting you don't want to be part of. That's the kind of meeting you don't want to have. So be the person that helps make the meeting one that has an outcome. Every time you go in a meeting, that's a chance for you to shine if you see it that way. So prepare yourself, pay attention, do your thing, and people will notice. And again, you'll be surprised by what you learn if you're paying attention to the room. You can figure out all sorts of people's agendas and perspectives. From a culture point of view, you can figure out a lot about your company if you're the one paying attention. We're coming closer to the end of my tips. Just like you should always ask for the sale if you're a salesperson, you should ask for the job if you want to be promoted. But you don't walk up and say, I want this job. What you should say is, I want this job. I think I'm ready, but what you think matters a lot more. So if you were me, what would you do in order to be the perfect choice? I like to flip it around and say, if you were me, because it puts the person on the other side of the table in a safer spot instead of them having to tell you, here's what you should do, which almost implies here are things that you don't have. And that's not always an easy conversation. If you say, if you were me, that lets it be a little more third person, and they can say, well, I would go do this, and I would talk to this person, and I would get training over here, and maybe I would do that. They get to talk about it a little bit off to the side. The cool thing about asking is that it opens that conversation of, I want to get promoted and I would like to have that job. And it's a little like politics, where the old saying used to be, you had to run for you had to almost be a presidential candidate once and fail in order to become president the next time. People have to see you as a person that's part of the pack that is up for that promotion. And if you ask and you talk about it, you automatically put yourself into that running. But the key when you do that is, don't argue, don't complain. That's not what this conversation is about. The conversation is about you listening and asking questions and trying to understand and take the information you get and help that let you create a plan that takes you to where you want to go. So if your boss says, I really would like to see you take on more informal leadership roles, and you think, well, I've done that 10 times, don't argue about it then. Just say, really, are there certain aspects that I should do that in, or are there certain ways that I should do that, or are there opportunities you see for me that maybe I could step into? Or are there times that you've seen me not step forward when I should have? That way, again, you're giving them a chance to talk to you, you're making it a little less confrontational, and you can learn some stuff. Whenever you argue, you don't really learn anything other than what you want to say. And again, for this one, always see it as your responsibility to be the best candidate, because it is. So ask for advice and then act on that advice, because the person you're asking is probably the person who will make the decision. So if you can tick off the boxes, you're much closer. Here's my last one. The best way to get promoted, and I've promoted, I don't know, in my time I've probably promoted 120 or 130 people. Work harder than everyone else. Nothing else that you can do will make a bigger difference than working hard. And I know you're saying to yourself right now, I already work really hard, nobody notices, nobody pays attention, nobody cares. They do, but one, maybe you're not working as hard as you think you are. Two, maybe you're not working hard in the areas that add value to your company. Three, maybe you haven't picked out the right things to work hard on that get you some visibility and that also drive results. So take a step back and say, if I'm not getting to where I want to be, and I think I'm working hard, what do I need to change? There are lots and lots of things that you can't control about getting promoted or about your career or about really everything. But you can always control what you do and how hard you work. So if you want to stand out, if you're the most focused, most efficient, most results-oriented, hardest working, best work ethic, best attitude, all of that stuff, you'll stand out. Probably because you'll be the only one trying. So if you're still not convinced that this makes sense, here's my pitch. I work for big companies. I work for a Fortune 500 company. I work for small companies. I've never seen the person who truly deserved the promotion not get the promotion. Now, there are a lot of times when there might be two people up for a job and they're really close, and this person gets it and the other person feels like they got shorted. Sometimes that happens. Close calls are tough and they do get subjected. But if this person is excellent and this person is not excellent, this person gets the job. I've never seen it not happen. So if you think that you are head and shoulders the best person for a job and you don't get promoted, you have to stop and take a look at yourself and say, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not seeing this as clearly as I can. Maybe you ask for advice for somebody else, talk to people, do something, but something that you are doing is not working. And never forget that just doing your job is not going to get you promoted. That will allow you to just do your job, quite frankly. If you're just meeting expectations and just putting in your time, that's cool, but don't expect that that's going to lead you to better places very quickly. So your goal, and in the beginning we talked about goals, your goal is to do everything you can to make sure that you are the only person that can get picked. So think hard about what you've done and think harder about what changes you're going to make. Again, you want to make sure you're the only possible choice. Don't leave it up to the referees. Don't leave it up to the judges. It has to be you because you are head and shoulders the best person. The cool thing is if you put in that kind of effort to be that person, you'll have learned a lot of stuff along the way. You'll have grown a lot of skills. You'll have a lot of abilities that you would not have had. You'll have made some connections and you'll have grown a network because you will have worked with people and helped them succeed. You'll have all this cool stuff that happens as you're doing it that you get to carry with you. And a lot of that will form a building block for the promotion after that and the promotion after that. So none of that is wasted. Even if you don't get the very next one, you are still developing and you are still making yourself a better candidate. And you're still just a better person, both professionally and personally. And you can never beat that. And one more thing. I know we all have different strengths and weaknesses. You might not have the same level of education, you might not have the same connections, you might not have the same mentors, you might not have the same experience as other people. There are all kinds of pluses and minuses. But starting today, you can still do the things that I've listed here. You can still be early, you can still stay late, you can display a great attitude. Think about how many of your coworkers do not. You can still always show positive body language. You'd be amazed how body language influences how other people see you and perceive you as promotable. You can always be energetic and enthusiastic. You can be the one that says yes and not just okay. You can be trainable and coachable. You can ask for help. You can offer to help. You can volunteer. You can be more prepared than everyone else. You can do that one little extra thing that nobody is doing. And we're back to my earlier theme. Most of all, you can always, always work harder than anyone else. And that is my presentation. So I think I'm going to answer some questions.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm back and we've had some amazing conversation and questions in the chat. So thank you so much, Jeff, for a great presentation. And keep those questions coming if you guys think of anything, because it looks like we've got some time to talk. So I think our first one was from Kashif. Specifically in a sales-focused or management role, oftentimes the results are expected really quickly. So how do you balance kind of managing and helping others while also getting your work done to still get promoted?
I think early on, since results are expected quickly and that's the core of your job, I think you have to focus on that part first. You can still do a little bit of stuff with other people to try to help others and build your network that way. You can do a little bit of that, but if the core of your job is, I need to accomplish this, get that done first, because no one is going to promote you unless you are seen as excelling at the core responsibilities that you have. So whenever you first start a job, you can be looking around for opportunities and kind of making notes for ways that you would shine and stand out. But early on, the thing is to just, one, become competent, and then 2, become outstanding. And somewhere in that zone between competent and outstanding, that's when you can start to flex out to some of the other stuff.
Cool. All right. This one is, how do you figure out when you feel that there's a lack of communication between you and your boss? How do you go about talking about getting a promotion? It's a tough one.
Well, your first part of the question was, how do you figure out when there is a lack of communication? If you do not feel that the way you and your boss interact is working for you, well, then there's your answer. That doesn't mean that your boss is going to agree. And it depends on the nature of your department and how many people there are and stuff like that. I've always found that if you are sincere and you go and ask someone for help, and you don't do it in a, wow, woe is me, I need you to help me because I can't do this myself. But if you go and say, you know how this works, you're really smart, you've got a lot of experience, you make this a positive, and then you say, I could use can you give me some advice? Here's what I'm struggling with. Make it about you, but make the solution side of it about the fact that they are smart and they know what they're doing. Then that's usually a really easy conversation, because all of us, implicit in my inability to speak. Implicit in someone asking you for help is the fact that they respect you and they like you, because they wouldn't come to you for help unless they thought you could help them. So if you do it that way, then even a boss who doesn't communicate with you very often is probably going to be a little flattered, a little pleased, and they will try to talk to you. That doesn't mean it's going to work, but that's your first shot.
Sure. And I guess kind of to follow up on that, and there's been some conversation in the chat right now, Alex asked that a lot of college students are looking for jobs and aren't really in the real world yet. But what are some pieces of advice that you would give them to get promoted in those early stages of the job?
Wow.
Yeah.
I would say that the first place that you go is you will stand out if you are, let's say that you and 10 other people have been hired into a certain level of a job out of college, which happens a lot in some companies. Most people walk in assuming that they will be taught everything that they need to know. And then, unfortunately, and you should really, but unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Companies want you to hit the ground running. They want to give you a little bit of information, but then they've got other stuff to do. Your boss has way more to do than teach you everything about your job. It would be nice if they didn't, but they don't. So your job is to look at it and say, okay, I'm going to come in and I'm going to take what they give me, but then I'm going to make it my responsibility to get the rest of the skills and knowledge and experience and connections and stuff that I need. And you just have to switch from that I will be taught mindset and say, I'm going to figure this out. And if you do that, your peers are going to still be sitting around moaning about the fact that they don't understand how something works and nobody will help me. And you're going to be the one that goes and finds someone that knows how to do that and says, can you help me? Can you show me how to do this? And again, when you go and do that sincerely, I've never run into a situation where somebody says, no, go away. If you're nice and sincere and you're like, can you help me? I'm really struggling with this. It's amazing what you'll learn. And you'll start to build some of those connections that you need that most of your peers are not going to be building.
Sure. All right, let's see.
That's your job from now on.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. These are such great questions, guys. Keep them coming. How do you handle a situation where you want to grow but aren't given an opportunity to do so, but you see people who have come onto the team after you getting promoted?
The first thing you do is you look and say, what things maybe did they do that I'm not doing that got them that opportunity? And don't look for the stuff like, oh, they're friends with somebody else or they're that other stuff. You can't control some of that. And a lot of times that's not the case. There's something that you are not doing or something that you are doing that is sort of keeping you out of that area. Then the next thing to do is, if you feel like there are opportunities, make some of your own. You don't have to wait for someone to say, hey, we would like you to do this. You can be the one that steps up and says, hey, we've got a problem with this, and I would love to take that on, and I'll do it. I know that sounds trite and that's really simplistic, but lots of times as a boss, depending on how big your department is, you you know there are a lot of problems, but you can't deal with all of them. And you're dealing with the hot spots. And if somebody comes and says, hey, I see this, I'll take care of it, I'll let you know when I'm done, I'm going to say go. And then if you do that a couple of times, invariably that success will then make your boss come to you and say, hey, I got something I need you to do. So take it on yourself to prove that you can get things done, and then hopefully some stuff will come to you. That doesn't mean maybe sometimes it just doesn't work, unfortunately.
I think that's...
But assume that you can control.
Sure. So I guess this is kind of a follow-up one. This is, where do you draw the line on volunteering? So when does volunteering and trying to give extra to the company start being taken for granted? And what is like the norm?
I think you'd have to look around at your organization first and see what most people do. And then your goal is to do a little bit more. I think that's probably the place that I would start. Then if you feel like you are volunteering a lot and you're not getting any credit or praise for that, or it's not getting you anywhere, then do two things. One is look at the kind of stuff you're volunteering for and see if that's the sort of stuff that is truly appreciated and valued, because it may just be that you're volunteering to do stuff that, oh, okay, that's cool, he did that, but I don't really care.
Yeah.
And then maybe try to switch into some other stuff that maybe does have more impact. Or just go, again, as long as you're not confrontational about it, there's nothing wrong with going to your boss and saying, hey, I've been doing these things, and I'm not really sure if that's helping me to grow and to be a better candidate and stuff. What do you think? Just do it like that. Don't say, why am I not? Because nobody takes well to that. But if you're just kind of what do you think? Where am I? Am I messing this up? Am I looking at this wrong? I've known very few people in leadership positions that would not respond positively to that conversation. But it is all about how you approach that.
That's hard. I think another sticky situation, I think this is from Nick. After being promoted over older or longer tenured employees, do you have any recommendations on managing those relationships with them who still might be upset with you?
Oh, that's so hard.
Another sticky situation.
Yeah, that is, and that's happened to me, and that is so hard. Number one, don't apologize for having been selected. You didn't pick it. Someone else chose you. So that happened to me one time. I went to my boss and said, hey, I just got this job, and I know Lester, that was actually his name, I know Lester's going to be mad. And my boss basically said, heck with Lester, he wasn't the best candidate. If he's mad at anybody, he should be mad at himself, which was fine, but Lester was still mad. So the first thing is don't apologize, but also don't act like, wow, look at me, I'm superior. Focus really hard on doing a good job so that people say, you know what, wow, he did deserve that. He's doing a great job. Even if I wanted the job, I can't say he or she is not qualified. And then two, try to find ways to sort of smooth it out. And the best way for me to describe that is an example. I went to another company. I took over a department. The guy who was in the role, who got demoted when I was hired, worked for me. So I took over his 300 people. He works for me now. He hated it. And I understand why. And the people there, it was uncomfortable. He was uncomfortable. He knew people were looking at him, the whole thing. You can imagine the dynamic. So I didn't really have that conversation where, oh, dude, I know this is really hard and we're going to get through it and all, because I could tell he didn't really want that. And I didn't have it in me to have that conversation either. But I just looked around and saw a couple things where I could tell something bothered him. Like he got moved out of his office into this little cubby hole somewhere. And I thought, well, that's kind of cruddy. So I found him a better office and said, hey, you really ought to be here because that puts you closer to people on the floor, and I think that's better. And he was happy because he had that. I found him a couple roles that I knew he would want to take on that showed that I had confidence in him and that I wasn't looking at him like, wow, you're the guy that got demoted, that you're a valuable guy. And it took about 6 months, but we got to a really good place. So don't apologize, do a really good job, and then try to find ways to show that as their boss, you're going to try to help them succeed and maybe help them get to where they want to be.
Sure. That's
but
great.
but it's not easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And
That's probably rule number one, is accept it's not going to be easy and don't expect it to be any different.
yeah, these relationships are almost the most important part that you have to keep a hold of. So I think this one is from Ads. He says that, what would you suggest for people who are really introverted and like to work hard but struggle actually bringing attention to themselves?
There's a bunch of different types of attention. And I know what you mean. There's the stand up in a meeting in front of 20 people and talk about your cool idea. That's hard for some people. That was hard for me. The best way to bring attention to yourself if you're introverted that way is to be more task focused and say, okay, well, I'm going to knock this out, whatever this may be. And that's going to be a high value thing. And that's going to get me the attention of people who know that I performed really well, but I don't have to stand in front of people and actually talk about that. And it doesn't have to be a public thing. So I would just focus on things that you do really well that also add value and try to do them really well. And you would be amazed how the right people figure out who did those kinds of things.
Sure.
It spreads really fast. And then the second answer to that question is that at some point you're going to have to get comfortable being in front of people sometimes and calling attention to yourself. And the best way to do it is through action, not by talking. So do something like, do it in a participative way. Wow, that didn't come out right. Sorry. I guess it's back like in high school. If you had to do a speech and they assigned you the topic, you were really nervous because you don't really know what you're talking about and it's hard and it's uncomfortable. But if you knew what you were talking about and could talk about something you were interested in, it was a lot easier. That's your goal. If you're going to jump in a meeting and maybe call attention to yourself, sort of, do it on something that you really know, really understand, hopefully really like, and that you feel confident in. Confidence is often situational. No one is confident in every situation everywhere. So pick the spots where you feel more confident and dive into those.
That's great advice. Thanks. Let's see. We got a couple more. Here's a good one. How do you help your boss when they have the attitude of having everything underneath control, but you know that they're really frustrated and need help?
I guess I would, a bunch of answers. I would start with, if you know areas where things are out of control, then figure out some solutions, or at least be willing to step up and say, hey, this seems a little odd over here. This isn't working really well. Is there something I can do to help with that? Or is there something, go ahead and volunteer or offer or ask. And I guess that is really the answer. If you think your boss is struggling, there's nothing wrong with not saying, hey, you're struggling.
Yeah.
That's probably not the way to go. But to say, hey, I know our warehouse is, our on-time delivery rate is tanking, and I'd love to help with that because I've always been interested in that, even if you haven't. I've always been interested in that. What can I do to help? Just don't come out and say, hey, wow, you're struggling, unless you're already friends. I had a boss one time who was like that, where I could actually go and say, man, that presentation was awful. You've got to go out and talk to these 3 people because they walked away thinking that they're losing their jobs. And he was okay with that, but we had that sort of a place. And that's a neat place to get to. So you can start by just doing it the softer way, like, hey, I know this is a problem. Can I help? And in that interaction, you might get to another place.
Sure. All right. Let's see. Last couple questions. How do you prove yourself when your boss works remotely or isn't always around?
Most remote situations, people have a few more KPIs, and they usually have a few more metrics that measure their performance and their outcomes. It's kind of the nature of the beast because you can't see.
Yeah.
So that would be your first thing, is to make sure that you are solid on all your deliverables, but also that you communicate a lot on your side about your deliverables, about what you're doing. I think in remote situations, over communicating is actually a good thing. Most bosses appreciate that. They would rather be told than have to ask. They would rather know ahead of time rather than find out on the scheduled like check-in day. So that would be my first thing, is to over communicate and hit my targets, and over communicate.
Sure.
That's not biggie. That's actually for people that hire people that will be in remote settings. That's typically a major component of the interview process, is figuring out how that person likes to work. And they are looking for people who are proactive in communicating and don't see it as the boss's job to find out what's going on. They see it as their job to tell the boss what is going on. That's a huge thing for people hiring in those jobs.
So kind of as a follow-up on that one, how and when do you draw the line between being a professional and being too personal with your boss?
If you are going to err, always err on the side of professional, first of all, because you can't go wrong there. But if you go a little too personal, you almost can never take it back. And it makes it awkward. If you and I are pretty good friends and I work for you, and then you need to have a hard conversation with me, sometimes that's tough for you, even though it's your job, and you may not have it, and that may affect my performance, and it may affect my promotability, which is kind of what we're talking about. So I think you're always better staying on the personal side, but then past that, I would mimic what is given to you. So if your boss is pretty disclosey and likes to chat about personal stuff, then that opens it up a little bit. But if her line is here, your line should stop short. Always. Never take your line all the way to wherever your boss is. And whenever it feels even the smallest bit uncomfortable to you, well, then that's when you stop. And that's okay.
Sure. Okay, this one is from Nyla. She says, how do you explain to a manager that you would simply just like higher compensation but not a huge promotion? It may be a different area, but still awkward conversation.
So basically how to ask for a raise?
Yes.
Kind of what you're talking about. It's the same type of conversation as how do I get promoted, but what you're focusing on is how your performance within your job and your expectations exceeds the expectations and why that is of value to the company. So if you're just going in and saying, I need a raise because I need to make more money, that may be very real, but it's kind of irrelevant to your employer if you think about it. I know that sounds harsh, but it's kind of irrelevant because no employer has unlimited sums that they can pay people whatever it is they think they need. So you've got to look at what you're doing and say, all right, here's where I'm outperforming, and here's how that actually delivers tangible value. So you can almost see it like a project justification kind of a thing, where if you're going to, you're starting a project and you're going to spend this much money and you expect this much return, and you decide if it justifies the expense based on the return, you look at what you're doing and say, I outperform in these areas, it generates this, that's why it is worth a little bit more in my raise. But you have to be very fact and figure-y and specific about why. You can't just go, I've been doing really well and I think I deserve a raise. That may be true, but that's not a compelling argument. If you were on the other side of the table, you wouldn't listen to it. So find out how you outperform, figure out the value that provides, and then you can have that conversation. Then it's objective. Then it's not, wow, I'm worth more. It's, here's what I do. Here's the value of that.
And that's fair. And I think that's what some of the conversation is happening right now in the chat. So I think everyone's...
And you will not, and it will always be hard though.
Yeah.
Except when you walk in, that it is going to be hard. Yeah.
I think the biggest fear everyone has is what if they say no?
Well, what if they say no? What if you go in and say, this is what I think I deserve, and the other person says no? Then your next question should be, fair enough, what do I need to do? What do I need to show in order to be deserving of, or in order for you to give me a raise? What would you like to see from me? And turn it around. At that point, it's okay to turn it around and say, what do you need? What do you expect? They may say, you know what, I can't, it doesn't matter. I can't pay any more in that job, then that'll tell you something, and you'll say, okay, well then I've got a decision to make. If they give you some concrete stuff, cool. Go back to your desk, write it down, focus on those things, come back at some point and be able to say, remember when we had that conversation? Here's what I've done. Let's talk about that raise again.
Wow.
So, but that would be the thing. If you're not getting it, if he says no or she says no, then say, okay, what do I need to do? Same thing with a promotion. If you're saying, I think I'm ready to be promoted, and the other person says, no, I don't think you are, okay, what do I need? Where's my gap?
Sure. Cool.
I know that sounds simple, but that is how it works.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for all your awesome questions. And Jeff, thank you for your amazing answers and for your time.
Can I answer one more question? I see on the screen?
Yeah, go for it.
I saw one, oh shoot, it was from Rupa. It said something about if you don't see yourself growing.
Yeah, there you go.
When do you know it's time to leave?
Yeah.
This is a conversation we had earlier as well. Whenever you look at job hopping or changing jobs, if you are in a current job and you are getting a certain amount of things from it, whether it's skills, responsibilities, experiences, all that stuff, and if you look at another job and it's just kind of the same thing but at a different company, then I don't know that that's particularly helpful. So if you feel you're not growing over here, what you're really saying is, all right, it's time to start looking. That you should definitely do. And then look at the different jobs that maybe you have a shot at and say, do I add significant skills, accomplishments, achievements, whatever, to my toolkit by going over here? And if I do, hey, that might be the right move. If I'm not, then you have to kind of weigh them out and say, okay, am I just so unhappy here that I'll take anything? But the key is whenever you go to another job, what will that do for me long term in terms of skills, experience, accomplishments, all that stuff? That's the way to do that. If you are stifled but you don't have opportunities, where are you going to stay? So you could, I guess my short answer to that is, and it's my wife's premise, always be looking. Because you never know. Doesn't mean you're unhappy, doesn't mean you will leave, but you never know what's out there. So always be looking. Don't wait to look when you're really unsatisfied or when it feels like it's too late.
There you go.
And that's it for me.
Very cool. Any other questions you want to answer? Or?
No, I just saw that one and I thought,
Yeah. No, it was great.
Rupa, I had to hook up Rupa there. So.
There you go. Great questions. Well, thank you guys so much for your awesome conversation and questions. And Jeff, once again, thank you.
You're welcome. I really enjoyed it. Thanks to Longwood for asking me to do this.
Absolutely. So feel free, guys, to connect with either myself. Once again, my name is Paige Rollins, and Jeff Haden on LinkedIn. We're happy to connect with you guys. And if you love this content, you can help us keep it free in the future by considering making a small gift. So it'll help us grow this program and continue to host these one-of-a-kind career engagement events for everybody. So I'll go ahead and put the link in the chat bar. But for those Lancers who are turning in today, so if you are an alumni, you can reconnect with your alma mater in a brand new way. We have a brand new program called 1 Hour a Month. So whether you're snapping a picture or connecting students and alumni to your workplace or just taking us on your travels, it's an easy way to share your spirit. So I'll also put that link in the chat box. But once again, so this is our LinkedIn Influencers Week, and it's only the beginning. So we've got 3 more days full of exciting speakers. So tomorrow is with Bruce Kasanoff at 12:30 Eastern Time. I'll put that link in the box right now. It is how to self-promote without being a jerk. So we hope you see everybody there. And you can find a copy of this presentation on our website, and I'll put that link in the chat box as well. So thanks, guys, so much, and we hope to see you tomorrow.